Happy spring break! The most spring breakiest spring break you've ever had, right? A lot of us are supposed to be doing cement right now, and it just sucks that we're not. But it is Holy Week, and hopefully you saw on Joanna's Instagram takeover yesterday. She talked a little bit about Palm Sunday, which marks the beginning of Holy Week, and it ends with Easter, which is this coming Sunday. And it basically is the last week of Jesus's life. He marked the beginning of that week by coming into Jerusalem on the donkey with all the palms and the waving. And that's what Palm Sunday was, when he rode in as king on a donkey instead of in a military horse. Instead of when everyone expected power and might, he came as humble as possible and just turned everything on its head. And so much of this last week leading up to Easter has that same theme, taking what people expect, the desire for wealth and power and all of that, and turning them upside down and saying that this is how Jesus will rule and continues to rule today. So we wanted to do some short little devotionals with you every day around 4 p.m. We'll post them on Instagram here and on our YouTube page, because we have a YouTube page. So we'll make sure we get that link out to you as well. I think it's just Spokane Praxis. If you look that up on YouTube, you'll find it. But we're going to do this for you every single day this week leading up to Easter. And on Monday, we're going to kind of look at the next thing after Palm Sunday on this week when Jesus rides into town. He goes to the temple, which is the center of everything in the Jewish culture, in their main towns and their capitals. The temple was like the center of commerce and religion and marketplace, and all of that happened there, politics. Oh yeah, I shaved my hair off. I was so inspired by Sarah Munir at Praxis last Wednesday night that I just wanted to be more like her. So let's read. This is from Matthew 21, and it is verses 10 through 17. So it says this: The city of Jerusalem was in an uproar as he entered. "Who is this?" they asked. And the crowds replied, "It's Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, "The scriptures declare my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." The blind and the lame came up to him in the temple, and he healed them. The leading priests and the teachers of religious law saw these wonderful miracles and heard even the children in the temple shouting, "Praise God for the Son of David." But the other leaders were indignant. They asked Jesus, "Do you hear what these children are saying?" "Yes," Jesus replied. "Haven't you read the scriptures? For they say you have taught children and infants to give you praise." Then he returned to Bethany, where he stayed overnight. So quick recap. Comes into town, knows that it's the beginning of the end. First thing he does is go to the temple, and he drives everyone out. Well, who are there for like less than good purposes. He kicks them out. Some of the Gospels, it says he has a whip, and he like braided a whip, and he's whipping at people and like sniping doves out of the air and whatnot. And he comes and he cleans house. He basically shuts it down. And so why is it important that one of the very first things Jesus did was shut down the temple? So here's a little more context. Sacrificial offering had been such an important part of the Jewish people's relationship to God for a long, long time. What that means is, under the system, you would go to the temple and offer an animal to be killed. Your offering could be small, such as grain or wine, or even like a dove or a pigeon. But if you were like really wanted to be forgiven, if you really wanted to connect with God, you could have something more substantial like a goat or a sheep. Knowing if your sacrifice would be enough to satisfy God was a big cause for anxiety for the Hebrew people. They never truly know if they had done enough, if they had sacrificed enough, if their sacrifice of grain was good, or if they needed to have killed a goat for God to be appeased. And this commitment of temple sacrifice was unnecessary for a relationship with God. And Jesus knew that stress and that anxiety and that commitment to that like sacrificial relationship was not what God was wanting. So, especially since Jesus' death at the end of the week was going to put a mere end to this. Put an end to this system in a mere few days. So he shut it down. But even more context, it's important to understand that the temple in Jerusalem was a destination for the Hebrew people throughout Judea and beyond. The faithful would travel to the temple to submit their offerings with very specific rules to be followed. For example, according to Hebrew law, 2 doves or pigeons were required as a minimum sacrificial offering. For those traveling to the temple from way out of town, can you imagine how awkward it would be to try to pack up a couple pigeons in your carry-on luggage, your little satchel? Or maybe you weren't wealthy enough to afford the good animals like a goat or an ox, and all you could afford were the doves. So luckily for these people, there were folks in the temple who would be more than happy to sell these weak and weary travelers or lowly poor people a couple of birds to meet their required sacrifice. Not so luckily, these people were making a profit on these sales. They were charging a ridiculous amount of money for something they knew was needed for people to appease God, to meet the requirement. So not only were the temple merchants taking advantage of the faithful visitors, but they were also taking advantage of poor people who still wanted and needed to make an offering to God. Considering how much Jesus had to say about serving and loving the poor, he probably would not have been a big fan of what was happening at the temple. Additionally, there's even more to the corruption here. You could only pay for your offerings at the temple with a shekel. A shekel is a specific Jewish coin that many wouldn't have had available to them since the Roman coin was required everywhere outside the temple gates. So you with me? People only had Roman coins, but they needed to use a shekel at the temple to buy the animals for sacrifice to appease God. Fortunately, good news, there were money changers at the temple who'd be more than happy to swap out your Roman coins for shekels. Woo, great, party, it all works. But again, unfortunately, these money changers were making a profit off of the faithful. They charged a fee to swap your money and would often charge fees that were far above what the law said was allowed. The scheme was allowing people to profit off of the Hebrew people at the temple, which was the center of their religion. Once again corrupting a sincere and a faithful practice. So this is the situation Jesus walked into in the temple. This is the situation that he walked into after arriving as king riding on a donkey. This is the situation that he shut down. So we posted the week-long devotional on our website at SpokaneFPC.org. Then you can go to connect, click on Praxis, scroll down just a little bit, and it says Holy Week Devotional. You can print it out or just download and follow along. But as you come to these every week, come with paper and pen. If you can print that off, awesome. If not, just keep it on your phone and write your answers to the questions. But there's a couple prompts for you on there today. How do you want to start your Holy Week, which I'm guessing is starting with a whole lot of disappointment and not having it be a normal spring break, not being in Tijuana, not being able to leave your house? How do you want to start this week and allow Jesus to enter in as King? And maybe think about what things in your life, like at that temple, can be shut down during this time. We hear a lot of people being like, hey, once all the noise in my life was taken away during this quarantine, I've actually realized I don't need X, Y, or Z. And I really need A, B, and C. So maybe some of the stuff you don't need, what can we shut it down? Again, we love you. We are praying for you. Your leaders are here with you always. We'll be praying for you this Holy Week. And we'll see you tomorrow, same time, with your devotional downloaded with some pen and a paper. Goodbye.